But another thing that it goes into my mindset blockers that I got is that I chose the Airbnb in an area that was definitely not the best part of town. And a very clear reason why I did it is because it was lower cost. And so my thought process was like, hey, I need to be able to afford my mortgage for this house that I'm gonna get. And I also need to afford rent in another apartment, regardless of where I live. Welcome to Empowermente, the headquarters of Latina Empowerment. This is try number 3 of recording this. Hello and welcome. As you can see, we have a new setup. We're learning and growing and improving and iterating as we go. Progress over perfection. We are good. We are trying. We are improving. Thank you so much for being here. If you're here, I don't take it for granted. If you like the show, please rate it with 5 stars. We need it wherever you're listening to, or like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. So this is the 3rd time that I'm trying to record this, and guys, doing this is not easy. It is a lot. But I am determined to get this done today, and I am gonna love it and I am gonna enjoy it. Why? Because there's nothing better I could be doing than sharing this with you right now. And today I want to share a quote to start that I got from Instagram, because that's how I want to start my podcast. And it's for my passionate people. So if you are a passionate person, which I think you are because you're here, this is for you. Passionate people can't settle for a normal life. We're destined for greatness. We're destined to have the greatest love story, friendships, family, adventures, lifestyle. We're meant to find magic and create magic. It's our purpose, and our passionate heart knows it. And it's by Amanda Pereira in the Third Eyed Thirst Instagram page. Sometimes I think I'm a bit excessive, and then I see some of these other posts and I'm like, I'm watered down. So this episode is for you if you're thinking about investing in real estate, about doing Airbnb, or if you already do it and want to learn something new or different. And I'm so excited to share with you the journey of how I got started with Airbnb and things that I've learned, things that went wrong, some horror stories that I went through, and if it's all worth it at the end of the day. That's the question. And so I have some life updates before I get started. So first of all, I'm excited because along with this new setup, I've got some new decorations in our apartment, and it looks so nice. Like, it's really starting to be a home. And I cannot believe that I've been here in Arizona for 7 months. I've honestly had an amazing time here. And it is fucking hot here, very hot, but it's been an enjoyable experience. And another update is that I'm really into Pilates. I'm in my healthy girl era. I eat good every day. I don't eat good for every single second of the day. I just had some hot Cheetos, for example. That's what I was craving. So if any of you know of protein alternatives to hot Cheetos, let me know. But yeah, I've been doing Pilates every single day, and I'm doing some sports like tennis and basketball, and overall just like really investing in my body and my physical, and I'm so excited. And my main focus right now is building my Latina empowerment circle. I'm looking to work with women who want to invest in themselves and have a community, and have me as a coach guide them through their self-discovery journey. I know that a few years ago I felt very lost, and I didn't know, like, I knew that what I was doing was not what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And I'm creating the program that I wish that I had at that time. And I'm so incredibly excited, and you'll be the first to know once it's out. Oh, let's get started. So today I'm going to be covering a little bit about why I got into Airbnb. And it's not just for the money. I know we already had an episode on building multiple streams of income, but it's not just for the money. Okay, so why I got into Airbnb, some things you would need to consider before even trying, and some things I wish I would have considered. The good, the bad, how I got started, and a horror story that happened, managing, and what it's like to manage my Airbnb now. And I'll wrap it up with some conclusions and tell you if it's worth it or not. But yeah, so let's get started on why I got started with Airbnb. So first of all, yes, Airbnb was a form of getting another income for myself. And I believe that I have taken advantage of every situation and every resource that I've had to be in the state that I am today. And I strongly believe that's what everybody should do. And I think it's different for every single person. So I think that goes hand in hand as to why I don't make my brand one thing. Because, for example, if I were to just talk about Airbnb and investing in my accounts, I just feel like Airbnb, for example, is just not really for everyone. It just depends on the particular financial and time with situation that you're in. But for me in particular, apart from building another stream of income, it was really about my family. And you may be thinking, what does this have to do with your family? So my personal Airbnb and project was always about my family. It was always about having a project and a family business with my mom and my stepdad. And I always have to open up in these things, but our parents are getting older. And if you're first gen, you can relate that it's a lot harder to have a relationship with them as time goes on. It's really hard for them to relate to you and you to them. And I just think for me, at least, it's been difficult. And when I thought about having an Airbnb, I thought about involving them in them helping me, that they felt that they were contributing to my life, and also me helping them financially with the things that they would help me with. And so I just always saw that as a way of moving cash flow and benefiting our family. And I think that really helped me just get motivated to do it, because it's something that they were going to be involved with regardless of where I was. And that was really huge, because when I thought about buying a house, this was at a time that I had been working in corporate America for 2 years. And it was during the pandemic, and we were not going into the office. But I knew that my team and my manager wanted me to go to Seattle. So I did. I went to Seattle. But I knew that I didn't want to be there long term. And I also knew that I wanted to buy a house. And I also knew that I didn't want to buy a house in Seattle because it was too expensive. So in the midst of everything that was happening, I knew that El Paso would be a great place to invest in. One, because prices are a lot lower than Seattle or any major city in the US. And two, because at all times my family would be there and they would be able to support me through it. That's some of the reasoning behind it. It was not only to give my parents a sense of purpose outside of their job and something that they could look forward to, but also something, for me and to secure my future. So that is basically building generational wealth to help myself, help my parents, and also help my future generations. So yeah, and I'm not going to say it was easy working with them. I had to have a lot of patience, and I had to learn a lot throughout the process about how to communicate with them. Because something that happens in Mexican culture is that Mexican culture is a collective culture, and it goes hand in hand with it being an indirect culture. I think Mexican culture, when you communicate very indirectly, and if you communicate directly, it's seen as rude. So I think just doing this project together with my parents and working together just exacerbated all these things that I already knew. And the differences culturally that we have, because if you hadn't noticed, we as Americans and people who were raised in the US have different values, even from our parents. And I don't know if that's the experience for everyone, but it is for me. And so that's why I got into it, basically to have this business with my family, to build generational wealth. And yeah, a big motivator for me, which is what I hope to be for you, is that I knew somebody that had done it. And if you are in El Paso and are interested in looking this up, look up Rose Gold Group. So they are a group in El Paso that is dedicated to remodel, to do real estate long-term, real estate short-term, contracting, anything that you can imagine in terms of real estate and housing, they do. And it is owned by a very dear friend, and her name is Nayeli Mesa, and she's actually also my sister-in-law. And she had done it. And it's crazy, and I can get to the story another time, but basically she wasn't my sister-in-law at the time. But basically she was really motivating to me and encouraging, and it just felt that much better to see that she had done it in the same city, in the same area. And yeah, I'm hoping again that I can be that for you. And spoiler alert, to tell you that it is worth the risk. Okay, so that is why I got into Airbnb. Next, I'm going to cover some things to consider. It is very important to do your research before you even consider any of this. I think a big reason for my success, which, spoiler alert, it has done very well, is because of the area that I chose to buy my house in. And it is an area that is very centralized. It's Central El Paso. That's literally what it's called. But it's 10 minutes from downtown, 10 minutes for the International Bridge, 10 minutes from the military base, 10 minutes from the university, 10 minutes from the hospital. It is just overall a really great area. So people who go to El Paso that are there for all sorts of reasons would encounter my Airbnb. So wherever you are in the US or even Mexico or wherever you're listening, but I think 99% of my audience is in the US and 1% is in Mexico. So if you're that person in Mexico, donde quiera que estés, it's very important to look at the demand. And there's a few ways you can look at this, but I looked at it directly on the Airbnb website. So if you're looking to host, there's a specific website for hosting that you look to see how much on average you could get per night in that area and the demand in that area. Another tool that I used at the time was AirDNA. I don't know if that's still a thing, but if it's not, you can always look for similar tools, which told me around what was the occupancy rate for houses around the area. And so that is very important for you to research. Another important thing to consider is your financing options. Like, how are you going to get the money to get this house, right? And I will go fully into it in the things that I've learned. But basically, you have a lot of different options. And what I ended up doing is called house hacking. So I lived in the property while renting another part of the property. And eventually now it's an investment property, but buying it as a first-time homeowner and primary homeowner and make it your primary property has huge advantages. And yeah, I think overall you just have to be very careful with the law and the mortgage agreements and all of those things. So please do your research. Let me go into the good. Actually, let me get some water before I go into the good. Okay, so first, the good. Having an Airbnb is a form of passive income. You are proportionally not investing as much time and getting money out of it. It's a business that brings you cash flow every week, every month, without you having to invest that much time in it. And I do think passive income doesn't completely exist because, of course, you have to invest so much time initially to get it up and running. But I think Airbnb is one of the most passive things that you can do in the grand scheme of things. So that's a great plus. Another great plus is that real estate investment is one of the best investments that you can make. Why? Because the value of properties is always going to go up. And that's just the reality of things. That's just the reality of things. That's just how the market works. So the way that I thought about my investment was that, hey, even if I didn't make a profit and get cash flow, get money every single month from this, whatever I got was going to be paying off the mortgage. And when time passed, I would be able to sell the property at a higher cost. So I always, although it is a short-term property business, I always saw it as a long-term investment because I never thought about just the short-term gains that I was going to gain per week and per month. I was thinking more long-term. So properties will always go up in price, baby. Even 1 month, even 1 year, even 2 years, the property will be worth more. Some of the bad things and the reasons why I wouldn't consider to do Airbnb is because there's a lot of unexpected costs that come. And especially as a first-time homeowner, that shit was insane. It was just so many things that came up. And my recommendation would be that whatever number that you think that you're going to need, you're going to double it. Because when you get a house, you're going to pay you're going to pay the down payment, you're going to pay the closing cost, maybe some renovations in the house if it needs it. Whatever you think it is, I would advise you to double it, because there's just stuff that comes up that many times you cannot anticipate. But there is a way to prevent it, which I'm going to go into when I share like the things that I've learned. Another bad thing or challenging thing is that there is a learning curve if you don't own a home. And even if you do, I think like every home is different. So it is a thing that will mentally challenge you, because there is so much when it comes to buying a house. Like there's the real estate agent, there's the laws, there's the mortgage lender, there's the bank. There's just so many playing parties. And on top of that, the actual house piece, that's a huge piece of knowledge that at least I didn't have. Yeah, that's some of the bad or the challenges. I want to talk about next about how I got started, some blockers that I faced, and my first horror story. Let me take a quick break. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about the program that I'm launching in a few weeks. I'm going to launch my Latina Empowerment group in a few weeks, and I am so excited. So what it's going to be a group coaching program for women who have been struggling to put out into the world that thing that they've wanted to do for the longest time, whether it be sharing their voice through social media, or getting their first public speaking engagement, or creating a blog, or creating a poem book. I was that person that took years to do things because of the self-doubt that I felt. And I really wish this program existed when I was in that position, because I felt like I was lost. I felt like there was so many things that I wanted to do at the same time and I couldn't. And I just felt overwhelmed with the sense of I don't have my shit together. And I navigated it with many tools that I learned through being a product and program manager, but also mindset and visualization techniques that have helped me throughout the years. And so I'm really excited because the program is going to be in a group setting. And so I really think healing and empowerment happens in comunidad, like juntas. It's transformative to create something and have people supporting you along the way. And so it's going to open the week of September 9th, and I'll give you more details later on in the show, but that's like what I've been working on. I've been working on the curriculum, on the videos, on just getting all the material ready for the women that are going to be joining. And if this sounds interesting to you, no worries, like it's going to come out very soon. And if you have any doubts as to if you think you're a good fit for the program, you can always book a call with me and I'll answer any questions that you may have. I did is called house hacking. And what that is basically that you buy your house as a primary home, but you rent part of it. The way that I would look at it is that you can either buy a house with a basement, with an attic that is easily dividable into two, like a duplex, or that it has an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit. And so when I was looking at properties, that's what I was looking for, because at the time, I didn't know if I was going to be in El Paso long term. I didn't know if I was going to be somewhere else. I didn't know if I wanted to live in the house for a certain amount of time. My life was very uncertain at that time. And I knew that I would get freedom if I was able to easily divide the house. And by easily divide, it's just like having separate entrances and having privacy of two different parties. That's what I anticipated. And the way that I started my journey with Airbnb and getting a house was when I had been working in corporate for 2 years. And one thing that I did that was a great idea was to get pre-approved. So if you are looking to get a car or a house, I would recommend you to get pre-approved. And what that means is that you're going to go to the bank and you're going to like basically say, hey, I'm planning to buy a house around this amount of money. Like, what can you offer me, basically? And they're going to give you an interest rate, a down payment estimate. No, actually, I think they just give you like an interest rate. And they say, yes, we would lend you a mortgage loan and the type of loan that you would be looking at. And I think it's great because once you go to your real estate realtor and you start to look at houses and you talk to the sellers of the houses or that they know of you, they'll take you a lot more seriously as a buyer because you're already pre-approved. Like, it is a lot of a less risk for them because you already are approved for the bank. So the bank is saying, yes, I'm going to give you the money. And I think that's really great. And one thing that I didn't mention is that since I bought it as a primary home property and I did it through a local credit union, my interest rate was very low. I didn't do it through the first time home owners program federally, which is a program that allows you to get a property for 3% if it's the first time you're buying a home in the United States. And by the way, I don't even know if that's still a thing. I'm assuming it is. But the bank itself offered me that low interest rate. And it's crazy because when I got pre-approved, I think the interest was 2.9%. And by the time that I buy the house, it went almost like 1 full percent. So that's one thing to consider when you're buying a house. Like, basically ask if the interest rate is going to change when you get pre-approved. And usually it is, but it's basically the bank saying yes. And one thing I didn't do is shop around for interest rates. And I didn't do that because I was very happy with the bank. I've had a bank account with that credit union for years, maybe 10. And so I was very happy with them and I really wanted to invest in a local bank. And so yes, so that's how I started my journey. And, since I knew people that already had Airbnbs, they were my guiding grace in knowing where to buy it. And, I knew the area that I wanted to. And so I knew the area that I wanted. And from the time that I got pre-approved to the time that I actually got the house, it was actually about 4 months. And a big reason was because I was not in El Paso. So it was super hard to make a decision without looking at the houses. And the house that I ended up choosing was a house that had an ADU, which I later turned into studio apartment. And yeah, I got very lucky with that house because there was a lot of people that were not looking at it. So either it was a bad decision or I just got lucky because at the time there were like people fighting for houses. But another thing that it goes into my mindset blockers that I got is that I chose the Airbnb in an area that was definitely not the best part of town. And a very clear reason why I did it is because it was lower cost. And so my thought process was like, hey, I need to be able to afford my mortgage for this house that I'm going to get. And I also need to afford rent in another apartment, regardless of where I live for the time being, because like, if all goes to shit, if the Airbnb thing doesn't work, and if people don't pay for my mortgage, I need to be able to fucking pay for it and pay for like another apartment and live my life. So that's the way that I thought about it. And so I got a lot of resistance from my family and from my parents because they were like, you make a big salary and you're telling us that you're gonna buy the house in the least nice part of town. And okay, guys, it's not ghetto. But I do think like maybe 10, 20 years ago, it was considered like a ghetto or like less nice area. I don't even know. And the reasoning is because it's like an old area. But I also think that's what makes it a really beautiful area. It's now a historically protected area. And there's a lot of new restaurants and bars that have gone there. And it's up and coming. But people who grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s may consider it as a not good area. And yeah, my parents were like, hell no, don't do that. They were anticipating for me to get like a really nice house. And the reasoning for that is because I do think at least my Hispanic parents see buying a house as a huge milestone, like a life milestone, because they anticipate that you're going to live in it and this is where you're going to grow and form your family and do all these things. But for me, it was never like that. This was not my forever home. This was not the home where I wanted to build my family and build my life in. It was just a house that would fulfill my needs for the time being. And that would be my first investment property. So for me, it was never about that. So there was a clash there because they were like, how can your first house and this huge milestone be this house? And so then you would see the house in that area and they were like, we don't get it, kind of thing, right? But I chose not to listen because the house had the ADU, check. The house was in an amazing area, check. And the house was a good price point where I could still afford another rent on top of it, check. I just had this vision of the business that I was looking to build and the house that I was wanting to have. And it was hard for them to see it because of that barrier that the house that you have and the car that you drive define you. And for me, that's just never been the case. I can talk about things that I invest in versus things that I don't. And at this time, I don't invest in a new car. And I actually drive a car that is more than 10 years old. And the house was actually built in the 1940s. So it's definitely not fancy at all. And I think that's what I would recommend to people. I wouldn't recommend to go all out for your first property because it's really not tied to your personal identity. I don't think it's that deep. At least that's the way that I see it. And so, yeah, so I ended up buying the property. And the plan was to basically accommodate the house to be rentable to Airbnb. And I would live in the studio. That was the plan. And so that's what happened. And you know, for the first 6 months that the house was on Airbnb, it did really well. And I ended up getting Superhost really quickly, which is a process where you have to have a certain number of nights occupied. You have to have a certain rating, a certain cancellation rate, a response rate. There's all these metrics that you have, but they're not hard to reach at all. And so then I got Superhost really quickly and it was doing well. And so what took longer is to have that studio be ready. And the studio was hard, y'all. It was very hard because it was basically an apartment, but it didn't have a kitchen. So if you don't know anything about houses, so stoves need a gas line. And so then there was some issues with the gas and the electricity. So I had to invest money into it. And one horror story that happened was that I hired somebody that ended up leaving the job halfway. So this person, like, I think they estimated me for $6,000, $7,000. And before he was done, he just ghosted us. And the reason why that happened is because a lot of the workers that I got were through my stepdad or just people that wanted to work for the day. And yes, you can get like better prices because they don't own like a company and they're not like, they don't have a license or cosas, they're not official. But you can run into issues like these where like they cannot commit. And that is a very common thing in the contracting world. So you have to be very careful and hire people that you trust. Other than that, I also used other workers for other things and it worked great and it was a better price. But you can also run the risk of them ghosting you. So I mean, it's a balance. And the reason why I told you that you should double whatever you think you're going to spend is because I had this idea of what the price was going to be for the front landscaping and the back landscaping. And it ended up being like 1/3 more. So I think I had anticipated $4,000 for the front and $4,000 for the back. And it was actually $12,000 total. And the reason is because I wanted like a cement drive up, like a ramp. And that was like $4,000 more. And like, I feel like all of this could have been prevented if I had a good idea of what I wanted from the start, but I didn't. Like, when I bought the house, I didn't know that's what I would end up doing. And it's hard because you have so many things to think about. But I think 2 things that I would recommend when you're getting a house is 1, have an inspector that is independent of the whole like contract with the mortgage and all of that to tell you if the house is going to need some work within the next 2 years that you should know about. Like, I don't know, floors, windows, roof, air ducts, el boiler, no sé, lo que se te ocurra. And also get contractor that can give you a quote for stuff like the one that I mentioned, like the front landscaping, the back landscaping. Like, you should already know about how much it's going to be, just so you're not surprised. But I will say it's hard to do since you're doing so many things and signing so many papers. It's hard to also try to build an estimate at the same time. Or maybe you can even do that before, right? I think that would be helpful. Let me tell you the horror story that happened. So picture this, the house was ready. Now I was getting the studio ready. And so then I ended up hiring another person to finish the studio, and it looked great. And one thing that I didn't mention is like the funnest part of everything was the furnishing. Make it your own. And you may think like creating an Airbnb is not a creative endeavor, and so your creative limiting beliefs will not come, but they did, because when you get reviews from people, it's like they are judging you. And so that was like a big part of business owning from Airbnb, like a big blocker for me. I was like, oh my god, like it's literally putting my creation out there, and people are gonna stay. What are they gonna feel? Are they gonna like it? It was also like the same style as a house, so I thought that was cool. And yeah, the house ended up doing really well. But my worst nightmare happened in my Airbnb studio. So it was the first night that I rented it out, and it was for a long-term rental. It was a woman. And so then I don't know how long she stayed, but she started to notice a weird smell in the restroom, and it seemed to be a pipe issue. So what ended up happening is that one of the times that she flushed the toilet, the water, instead of it going down, it went up. So the whole restroom was filled with toilet water. And as you can imagine, I was like so scared and embarrassed, and she was scared and embarrassed. And I felt so bad about it, but luckily I had a plumber that I called that went and looked at what was going on and could fix it within a few hours. But I felt so bad. And as a person who stays at an Airbnb, or if you rent a house or an apartment, I think we're very quick to judge. But those kind of things are really out of the landlord's control. It's not like I was negligent to anything. And so those type of things will happen. The best thing you can do is just do the best that you can do at that time. And so then I got the plumber, they fixed the problem, we cleaned it up, and it was all good. But I felt so bad. I give her a refund for those days. And not the whole month, but just like a few days. And I really apologized, and I told her I was doing everything that I could. And I think I was lucky enough that I got a guest that understood, and she was okay with it. She stayed the rest of the time, and it was all good. She didn't leave me a bad review, but it was just like a bad experience that happened. So yeah, that was like the horror story that happened. I think before going live, I was so incredibly stressed because I had a deadline that I wanted to meet. And yeah, I was just super stressed. And another blocker that I had is that I felt like everybody was taking advantage of me because I didn't know a lot about the particular topic we were talking about. So whether it be landscaping or appliances or things like that. And what you have to know is that houses have experts in every area. So you have roofers, you have people that focus on the floors, you have people that focus on fridges. So you cannot expect to know it all. You're just expected to know the basics of everything. And so don't feel bad. If I'm being honest, it did help to have a man with me. People would take me more seriously and they wouldn't take advantage of me. At least I didn't feel it that way. But maybe that's also a limiting belief. I don't know. Okay, let's see. So to close off, was this horror story and all the things that happened have made it worth it? The answer is yes. My Airbnb has done great in the last 2 years. So first I rented out the house, then I rented out the studio. And after a year of having a first-time homeowner loan, then you can turn it into an investment property. I'm not sure if it's 1 or 2 years, but I ended up doing it after 2 years. And so now it's like fully an investment property, and both the house and the studio are on Airbnb. And so the way that it looks now is that I invest maybe 1 hour a week into it, and I still get cash flow, and it's paying for itself, and I get profit every month. I get cash flow every single month. So it is really cool. In my opinion, all this overcoming and chaos was completely worth it to me. And yeah, it's been fun. It's been a learning experience. It's something different. And I don't anticipate getting another house right now because I feel like it would be another workload for me to take on. But I am interested in doing it probably next year, and I would have to talk to my parents about it to see that if it's something that they would want to help in. And for the future, what I anticipate myself doing, at least within maybe hopefully this year, is private lending. The way that it works is that I lend up money to somebody in a real estate business, and they use it to flip a house or to do something with a house, or to do an investment. And then I would receive the money a few months later at an interest. And what's cool is that it's a high interest rate. It's for sure more than inflation, which is 7%. And you don't have to do anything at all for this one, right? You just negotiate and do the contract with the person that you're lending the money to, and then you get the money back. The more money you lend, the better, but it can be anything, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. And the more money, the more you're going to get back. I love technology. So I just asked ChatGPT, and they did say, it said that, yeah, a typical rate would be around 10%. So imagine you invest, let's just say $5,000, and within a few months, you would get $500 more for that. If you invest $10,000, you would get 1,000, 20, 2,000, o sea, for doing nothing, basically. I do see it as doing nothing. I particularly am interested in that. Like, I'd rather get my money to work in that way, and it's another way to invest outside of real estate, or outside of the stock market. So something interesting I'm gonna be doing. But I think it's a really cool thing that haven't seen people talk about. And yeah, like, it's something that I want to do. And the way that you learn about those opportunities is like basically knowing people that do it, getting involved in like the networking area of real estate. I wanted to pack this episode with value and my experiences, and I hope that this was enlightening if you are thinking about Airbnb. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. Let me know what you want to listen to next. Y hablamos pronto.